Welcome. This is Real Healing, Real Awakening with Phil Golding.
I sit down opposite her. Her penetrating yet compassionate eyes envelop me in an aura of acceptance. Her gentle questions probe my vulnerable emotions as my ego looks for an escape but finds no excuse. She presents me with no agenda, no assumptions that misread me, only space carefully prepared for me to fill, which my insecure self can't help but pour into. She merges with me, yet does not lose herself. We are strangely one, yet I'm freer than I've ever been. I find myself revealed and brace for judgment, but find only the calm smile of one who can identify and understand. It washes over me like a soothing balm on my open wounds. I suddenly laugh at the pain as though it is no longer mine. I willingly open myself to her now. We are partners in this dark journey of self-discovery, that has the promise of a fountainhead of light divine, that mysterious source of wonder, desire and dread. She is the bearer of this light, the revealer of the real. It is my fourth visit to this place of solace. She tells me that it's time to do some healing, as she prepares to guide me into my awakening heart. I could tell her not to bother, the healing is already done, but my heart longs for the touch of soul. The poem is called The Healer. It reveals the relationship between the healer and the one being healed. When counselling or any other form of therapy is facilitated through a heart of unconditional love and real personal experience, I think it can be genuinely called healing. In regards to my own experience as a therapist, it is not so much the love I am able to offer my client or philosophy student. It is the way that being held in the atmosphere of total acceptance enables them to transcend into their own higher consciousness. They become their own healer then. Facing their fears and insecurities is not so confronting. Higher qualities such as compassion and forgiveness flow from their open hearts and embrace their vulnerable human self. The poem, The Healer, sets the theme for this second episode of Real Healing, Real Awakening. Last week I said I would focus on steps 3, 4 and 5. When it came to doing this second show though, I soon realised that step 3, letting go and tuning in, needed to occupy a whole episode of its own. Step 3 is the healing step, and it is the deepest and most challenging step to undertake. I will start this second episode with a brief summary of the 5-step process for healing, wisdom and empowerment to inform those of you who are new to this show, and offer a refresher for those of you who have tuned in once again. This philosophy, along with all effective self-realization paths, is centered around 2 essential laws of consciousness that heal and awaken the human mind. The first is the law of unconditional love, and the second is the law of total personal responsibility. The first step of the 5-step process is total self-acceptance, which refers to the law of unconditional love. The second step is total personal responsibility, which is, of course, the second law of consciousness. These first two steps provide the foundation for the process. The third step is let go and tune in, which is about putting steps 1 and 2 into practice when it comes to looking after our inner self. It is about healing and clarity. The fourth step is live in the now. This is about how to put that clarity into action as we create our life in the world. The fifth step is live the process. This is about the recognition that this process has no endpoint. It is about looking after and evolving our mind throughout this particular life and beyond. So let's begin with step 3, let go and tune in. As with part 1 of this 2-part series, I will begin with a condensed summary of this step, and then have a philosophical dialogue with the help of a couple of my meditation students. The condensed summary of step 3 is this. Letting go reveals how to step out of the ego games of blame, conflict, and controlling, and step into the freedom of personal growth and healing. Our life simplifies dramatically when we accept that the cause of our suffering is in our own confused thinking, and that the solution to this suffering can be found in the sanctuary of our own heart and soul. It is here that an unlimited power for healing and insight can be found. To change our life, it is our own reactions to the world and the people in it that we need to focus on and take total personal responsibility for. We do this by tuning into our own physical sensations, emotions and thoughts in the spirit of loving acceptance and compassion for ourselves. By staying in touch with ourselves in this way, we come to experience the healing power of love as our vulnerable human mind is embraced within the open heart of soul. We gain a great focus of power to change our world by first healing and changing any part of our own mind that is not motivated by unconditional love for ourselves and all others. Through this process, we gain clarity of mind and the ability to act wisely. Every experience, therefore, is an opportunity to grow in self-awareness, self-love, and self-empowerment. We can change our world, our experience of life, by simply changing ourselves, evolving ourselves, in other words. End of summary. I change my experience of the world by changing myself. Indeed, when I change the way I act in the world, I also change the way others react toward me. The way I act in the world is transformed by the way I act towards myself. The more loving acceptance I give to myself, to my vulnerable humanness, the more I embrace my humanness, like a loving and responsible parent would care for a beloved child, the more at peace I will be, the more clarity I will have about what is best for me, the better decisions I will make for myself, the more compassionate I will be towards others, the better they will respond to me. This is the essence of steps 1 and 2, total self-acceptance and total personal responsibility. In other words, accepting total personal responsibility to love ourselves unconditionally. Putting these two fundamental laws of consciousness into action in this way opens our mind and heart to the great ocean of unconditional love, of supreme universal consciousness. We are able to merge with this life force of love increasingly as our ability to be the loving guardian of our own human self increases. We are endeavouring to be love. We are being the representative of unconditional love to our own human self, and in so doing, we wake up the unlimited power of our own conscious awareness, our soul or Buddha nature, or however you want to relate to it. It is that part of us that is one with the universal life force.
Facing my pain and my fear is so hard to do. I often get so locked up in pride and defensiveness, or I feel depressed or really down on myself. How do I get past this pain to this place of healing, this sanctuary that you describe?
The process of transforming pain and suffering, fear and anger, shame and guilt into healing and love is one of the most difficult things to describe, and the hardest thing for our mind and its ego to understand. This is because this process requires the ego, the unawakened potential of our consciousness, to see things in the opposite way to what it is used to. Because the ego sees things upside down, as the Course in Miracles describes it, this is the step we most often skip over or simply neglect. At first, we are rarely willing to accept or able to grasp how deep this commitment to oneself needs to be. The ego wants to quickly get the pain over with, so it can get back to its comfort zones. Or it wants to grasp at the rewards of success without fulfilling the required personal development work. A short way down the track, though, the ego finds itself disappointed and disillusioned in the face of the next challenge that it is not prepared for. Step 3, let go and tune in, takes us above and beyond the ego's limited capacity. Step 3 is not about ego-analyzing, controlling or fixing anything, as the ego tends to want to do. Instead, it is about letting go, opening up, allowing, flowing and connecting. It is the art of being. We still need to think, but it is thinking in harmony with feeling, not in order to get rid of feeling. It is about accepting and working with our deepest vulnerabilities, whereas the ego, driven by the human self that is limited to mere survival, tries to avoid or suppress or be defensive about our vulnerabilities. Step 3, let go and tune in, is about consciously building a bridge of healing that enables the vulnerable human self to be lifted up into the loving and wise arms of the higher self, the life force of unconditional love. Here our ego is learning to step aside and simply occupy itself by keeping the door to the higher self, our compassionate heart, held open via our commitment to accept our humanness, to give our human vulnerabilities compassion. Our heart of consciousness, filled with loving intentions, becomes a sanctuary for the deep emotional wounds of the past that are still alive, still trapped within our mind. It is here that our emotional woundedness finds healing. Without having this sanctuary of loving acceptance within our conscious awareness to flow into when it is triggered, our trapped emotional energy has nowhere else to go but invade our mind and play havoc with our life. Of course, our ability to create this internal space for ourselves, this sanctuary of self-acceptance, is not going to be very skillful at first, but every little bit helps. With persistence, we'll naturally get better at caring for ourselves in this way as our experience grows. Before we can effectively connect to our human self, however, we must learn to let go of what prevents this vital connection occurring.
And what is that? What do I need to let go of?
I covered this extensively in Step 2, Total Personal Responsibility, in Episode 1. It is about letting go of condemnation and blame, about holding others responsible for our fears and insecurities. Indulging in condemnation and blame ensures that our ego remains the blind plaything of the distorted and heartless misbeliefs and motivations of an out-of-control human self. caught up in fight or flight. A self that is cut off from the heart and lost in unthinking negative conditioning. Where there is condemnation and blame, love is choked out. Healing and growth is not possible. We remain at war with our own humanness and the humanness of others, and at odds with our higher self. Letting go of the old ways is of course hard to do, particularly when condemning and blaming gives us this false sense of safety, power and pride. But if we want to grow and heal, let go we must. The secret to letting go is in steps 1 and 2. While I am accepting full responsibility for loving myself unconditionally, whilst I have set forth that very strong intention, I will be less inclined to project my pain onto others or beat myself up. I can at least be far more aware of when my mind is falling into that. Step 2, total personal responsibility, reminds us that as adults, we are beings of conscious awareness, which means that we have the power to take full responsibility for all that we think and feel. Our thinking and our feeling is in our own control. No one can make us think or feel. That's the power that an adult has. Therefore, any disturbance in our mind, we must look to our own self for the cause of that disturbance. Situations may trigger that disturbance, but it does not cause it. Our own perceptions, our own beliefs, what we carry in our own mind is what creates the disturbance, or what creates the suffering that we experience. So we are letting go of holding others responsible for our own confused thinking.
So as I get better at steps 1 and 2, letting go will come more easily.
That's right. It's much easier to face our fears and insecurities, to take responsibility for them when we are accepting our humanness, when we're giving ourselves the right to be human. We are not wrong for being confused, but because we're adults, our mind is our own responsibility. And we can do this because we have conscious awareness. We have that connection to the unconditional love of the universal life force, that love that flows through every single human being, that has consciousness, that is an adult, that has that developed capacity of adulthood. Because of that, we can be our own parent, our own loving guardian, to our inner self, to our confused and wounded human self. We can be our own guardian angel. That is step 1, total self-acceptance. And the step 2, total personal responsibility, putting them together, is the total personal responsibility to love ourselves unconditionally. And that takes the pressure off. It creates instantly a sanctuary within our own heart, within our own mind, where we can more comfortably and openly face our own confusion, take ownership of it. My mind is my own space. I am the authority of that space. So if I'm a good parent, a loving guardian of my humanness, then there's no need to be defensive. I am taking care of myself. I'm accepting myself. And that makes it so much easier. In fact, much healing naturally occurs as we are practicing these first 2 steps. After all, we are creating a loving sanctuary in our heart of conscious awareness for our vulnerable human self, our inner child to hang out in. This is naturally going to feel good and release a lot of residual pain. When the pain is very intense and scary, we can still be very easily swept away by this pain and the confusion that it plunges us into. This is when the emotional healing process is really put to the test.
It all seems so real when the pain and fear is strong. I just want to get away from it. I go into this horrible fight or flight state. I get desperate and do crazy things that I later regret.
What needs to be understood here is that emotions are meant to be felt. They are like energy waves. If allowed to flow freely, the way emotional energy is meant to, it passes quite quickly once having delivered its message to our consciousness. Emotions themselves don't need fixing, because that is not where the problem lies. The problem lies with our distorted thinking. It is our distorted thinking, such as blame or self-condemnation, thinking that we're not good enough, which is often at the root of all our suffering. That's the cause. That is what accumulates and perpetuates painful emotional energy. When the pain and fear is very strong, it creates a state of extreme vulnerability and despair in our mind. This pain is very difficult to deal with on mental levels, because the thoughts that the release of this dense emotional energy produces are very fear-based and irrational, and this extreme feeling of vulnerability triggers off those very strong fight-or-flight reactions. To uncover the deeper layers of pain and confusion and work with them, we need to literally disregard the thought content and hold ourselves open and steady to the emotional energy that is rushing through us. If we can do this with a strong conscious intent to open our heart of compassion to this pain, while not being diverted by the negative thoughts that may want to attack ourselves or others, this impacted emotional energy can be effectively and safely dealt with. This type of intense pain is like a small and very traumatized child who needs to be held for a long time while being allowed to empty out emotionally. Needless to say, working with such intense levels of emotional pain is very difficult to manage on our own. It is essential that you have a therapist or layperson with you who is experienced in emotional release work. They will help you to stay focused on the emotions without sliding off into the irrational thoughts, and hold you, if needed, as the most intense emotions come through. It is not unusual to revert back to being like a traumatized child whilst this intense energy is coming through.
Won't that harm me? What if it tips me over the edge? What if I can't come out of it?
As I said before, the attacking thoughts are the problem, not the emotions. The human mind is fully equipped to handle the most intense emotional energy. It is a matter of staying open and allowing it to flow through you. Another thing that aids this process is keeping your breath open and slow. When we go into fight or flight, our breath gets very shallow and quick. Our body tightens up and our mind narrows into a tunnel vision-like state. When we do the opposite and keep the breath open, deep and flowing, it sends a very different signal to the rest of the body. It helps to reduce the fight or flight reaction so we can stay in touch with our conscious awareness during the emotional release process. Once the pressure of this trapped emotional energy eases off, and if a space of loving compassion has been held open for this trauma, a heightened state of consciousness emerges from this pain, enabling you to receive a clear and positive insight into the fundamental nature of your worthiness as a human being and the importance of loving yourself unconditionally, which can be quite blissful.
It sounds a bit like giving birth.
This intense emotional healing process is often described in those terms. In fact, there is a sort of dying as well as the birthing going on in this process. What is dying are the fears and delusions of the mind that can no longer hold back the flood of emotions. What is born through this process is a new awareness of the power of ourself as conscious awareness, as soul, that is much bigger than and much more real than that pain and fear of the human self. As one who often facilitates this process, I find the bigger the pain to begin with, the bigger the bliss at the end. Such is the power of unconditional love. A trauma that may have seemed insurmountable for perhaps many years of our life can be swept away by the mighty hand of love in the space of a few healing sessions, providing you can stay open enough. Such a process does no harm to the body, but afterwards you may feel very tired. A good deep sleep usually follows such an emotional releasing session. There is often a feeling of a relieved, carefree lightness the following day, and even feelings of warmth and love. This is due to the weight of such heavy emotions being released from your body-mind, and your heart being so open to your humanness and to your higher self. This process for dealing with extreme emotional pain is the same for dealing with any emotional pain that is less intense. It is always important to hold your heart open to the pain first in order to allow the trapped emotional energy to be released and to neutralize any fight or flight reaction. It is our distorted thinking that needs fixing, therefore, and not our emotions. Our painful emotions are simply showing us where our mind is confused. The emotions are the foliage of the weeds that we see in the garden of our mind, but the distorted thinking is the roots of those weeds. If you do not destroy the roots, these weeds will keep growing back. But if the emotion is intense, this needs to be released first before any clarity can be gained. With our new attitude of loving acceptance of our humanness and a firm commitment to take responsibility for our emotional reactions, destructive thoughts can be safely re-examined and corrected. The human self's false pride, born out of self-condemnation, is removed enough for us not to be so fooled by it. We can see past these destructive thoughts to what is really needed. Often healing happens quite automatically because we are consciously opening our awareness to our painful memories with a loving heart. We become like our own loving guardian angel, who can go back in time and be the representative of unconditional love for our past self, something that was missing when the emotional traumas first occurred.
When my emotional pain gets triggered, it is like I revert back to some childlike state. I certainly feel like a scared child and react in very childish ways. Is this because this emotional pain comes from past memories? Do I somehow revert back to that state?
That is indeed what is happening. When triggered, this emotional energy floods our mind with the mind space we were in when the trauma first occurred. We literally, on a mind level, become that frightened child once again. A conscious emotional healing process, therefore, is very much like entering an emotional time tunnel that leads into various memories. Sometimes these old memories resurface quite vividly. Sometimes we only feel the waves of releasing emotions and are not aware of the rest of the memories, particularly if these emotions come from a very early age. It is like we return to the scene where we find our past child, adolescent or adult self stuck in the difficult situation that created the confusion and emotional wounding. This confusion and trapped emotion became buried in our subconscious because there was no one there for us at the time with enough skills to help us process the hurt. When we are not heard as children, particularly on an emotional level, when people don't take time to connect to us for whatever reason, we literally feel like we don't exist. Because we are so vulnerable as a child, we develop beliefs which conclude that we are unworthy of their love and unworthy of love in general. Now we can validate our own existence, our own worthiness, which is the root of self-healing and self-empowerment. As step 1 says, our worthiness is absolute, regardless of what we have done or what anyone may say. Other human beings can't decide our worthiness. Our fundamental worthiness, our fundamental right to unconditional love, is a reality of our very existence. We are a part of the universal life force. We cannot be separate from that. We only get lost in our own mind bubble, and so lose touch with the truth of who we are. Imagine a time when you were a child during a moment of real sadness and fear. Imagine being this child feeling lost and alone, without a friend in the world. Many of us have been in this place. You feel helpless and hopeless as you withdraw into your shell. You feel like you're in a dark hole, with the walls caving in on you. Suddenly, from out of nowhere, this magical scene opens up before you. It is like a beautiful park, a sanctuary, with a loving guardian waiting just for you, like something out of a Disneyland movie. One moment you are lost and alone, the next you are being embraced by this guardian angel, who is leading you into a beautiful sanctuary. This is what we are creating for our human self, our vulnerable inner child, whenever we consciously face and open up to this sad energy with the desire to accept it with loving kindness and care for it. This child in us is going to have such a different experience. Our trapped emotional energy is going to flow into a very different space within our consciousness, where healing is going to be a natural outcome. By consciously returning to these traumatic memories with an open, loving heart and a more enlightened attitude, you can literally be there for your own child self in a way that enables your inner child, the emotional needs of your human self, to be freed from confusion and emotional stuckness. It also helps to imagine your aware, conscious adult self actually stepping into this scene with your helpless child self in order to take loving care of this precious child. This can be your adolescent or adult self at some traumatic time as well. You can allow your child to perhaps have a good cry, to get out those pent-up emotions, all within your own imagination, as you just be there with the child, with your hurt emotions, providing acceptance and safety. What you are doing is releasing the emotional pain from the old memory, and in the process creating a whole new positive memory that will now put your mind at rest. Of course, this child within you and these emotions are going to be felt by you now and released through you now, which is often going to be confronting. Keeping open your compassionate heart to your humanness enables these emotions to be released safely and effectively. You may experience fear, shame, anger, and so on at first, and as you allow the process to keep flowing, you might have a good cry but feel a lot better for it. It is very important to understand that as an adult, your mind, along with your memories, belongs to you now. You are now in charge of this space, and you now have the power to take control of it and sort it out. Using a journal is very helpful in this process as well. Pouring out your pain onto the pages and then being the loving guardian of yourself as you respond in writing can bring focus to the process of healing and deepen your clarity. It also gives you something to look back on to gauge your progress. Therefore, in one way, you could say healing is feeling. It is often said you can't heal what you don't feel. Accepting and opening your heart to what you feel and staying open and being present with that feeling, be with it, observe it, really get to know it, helps you get to the bottom of what originally caused that trauma, what originally is causing the confusion in the mind that keeps those emotions on a loop and so ready to react.
I never thought of it that way, but now that I see it, all those things happened in the past, even if it was just yesterday. It might be now stuck in my mind, but it is in my mind. My mind belongs to me. I can do with it whatever I want once I learn how to work with my mind, which I can see is what you're trying to teach me here. But it's not all in the past, is it? Something can happen right now. How do I deal with that?
In the same way, in reality, 1 minute ago is still in the past. You pause, open your breath and your heart, and let the vulnerability and pain flow into your consciousness, into your conscious heart of loving compassion for yourself. Of course, if you are strong and clear enough, in the loving acceptance of yourself, you won't get hurt in the first place.
I hear some people say that going back into the past and hanging out in your emotions is just indulging in self-pity.
Not if you are really putting steps 1 and 2, unconditional love and total personal responsibility, into practice. Self-pity may be a fleeting part of the process at times, due to not always being above our confusion, but the intention is to take responsibility for the pain, to take care of it, not to wallow in it.
You mentioned the birth of a greater awareness through this process. You also mentioned something about wisdom. What do you mean by that?
When our compassionate heart is consciously held open to our trapped emotional energy, once the emotional backlog is cleared enough, space is then available for the intelligence of the higher self to enter. This is called intuitive insight, which reveals a more positive and empowering perspective on the past or present situation. The space is also there because the rational mind is much more still at this point. The higher self is like a quantum intelligence that can take in everything at once, and from the perspective of the highest laws of consciousness. It pays to be ready with your pen and journal when such intuitive insight comes, because the normal functioning of the human mind is usually too dull and cumbersome to keep a grasp of such refined information. Your average level of consciousness can be raised by practices such as meditation and, of course, your ongoing guardianship of your human self. If you persist, you will find that you can remain much closer to these higher vibrations. Intuition becomes more of a normal mental process. Intuition is like the combination of thinking and the higher feelings of the soul that always come from love. Of course, to become wise is to put the highest principles of consciousness into practice in your life until these principles are literally a part of you, until you don't have to think twice about it. Trying to fix emotions like the ego does is like telling emotionally distraught children to pull their socks up and get on with it, without actually connecting to them in a heartfelt, heart-to-heart way. This actually buries the emotion, erodes trust and destroys intimacy. If properly handled, emotions can be effectively and efficiently processed, leading to insight, wisdom and inner strength. It is essential that your emotional life is respected and properly looked after. This is a key to inner peace.
How long does emotional healing take? I guess that is going to be different for everyone.
Our emotional mind is very deep and very complex. There are no quick fixes. Healing one memory often opens the door to another. It is an ongoing journey of self-care and mind maintenance. Peace and happiness is not about no longer having issues to deal with. Life will always have its challenges. Peace and happiness is brought about by learning to be skillful and confident in the process of looking after the mind. We are learning to be a skillful parent, guardian, to our own human self. Stepping into this new way of being can take some guidance, because we will run up against our own self-defeating habits time and time again. This is not a bad thing though, because each time we do, it is an opportunity to open our heart of compassion to ourselves and to heal this confusion. We then have the opportunity to consistently feed into our subconscious mind new positive thoughts that are life-enhancing. In other words, we naturally get better at spotting the negative thoughts and turning them around. Sooner or later, our old habits turn into new ones that work for us rather than against us. Being an adult means we must learn to effectively parent the child that is still alive within our own memories. We have to grow up, in other words. One of the most wonderful spin-offs of building this type of relationship with ourselves, with our own mind, is that everything we learn that helps us to make a real connection with our own vulnerable selves also works where connecting to our loved ones is concerned, particularly our children, which is perfectly logical when you think about it. For many people, making a real heartfelt connection with themselves is one of the most special and profound events in their life. This in itself can be life-changing. For most of us who suffer chronic depression, for example, this can be the very thing that breaks the grip of the depression for good, like it did for me. I am now going to guide you through a visualization meditation that is designed to give you an opportunity to experience being conscious awareness, your higher self, while at the same time connecting with your vulnerable human self or inner child. Most of the work we need to do surrounding our inner child is acceptance, loving, compassionate acceptance. Our vulnerable human self is often related to as the inner child because most of the conditioning in our mind is in place before we are 10 years old. So much of the feelings, the negative emotions that we experience are coming from these past memories. Another reason is our lower mind, our human self, without the conscious awareness to embrace it, manage it, look after it, really doesn't get beyond the maturity of a child, like an 11-year-old child. You only have to look out into society and observe the fear and the squabbling, our addictions to entertainment, to the wrong sorts of food, to drugs, the way we mistreat the environment. These are all indications of a collective unawake ego, which runs on a very immature level of consciousness. It is this reason that we relate to it as the inner child, and it is needing the conscious awareness, the higher self, to take it in hand, guide it, and lift it into a higher state of consciousness. This is done without judgment, without condemnation. We lift up, heal, and evolve our humanness with loving compassion by taking total personal responsibility to love ourselves unconditionally. To better relate to your wounded inner child, it is helpful to build an image and a deep feeling for this small vulnerable self. It often helps to find a picture of yourself when you were a child and keep it out to remind you of how small and vulnerable you were back then. Maybe you can put it beside a picture of yourself as you are now, to remind yourself that you are now an adult as well, who is learning and capable of taking care of that child. And further still, find a picture that reflects your higher self, to remind you of what you are becoming, in a sense, what you truly are in your potential. If you can find a quiet space, a private place where you can sit or lie comfortably, close your eyes and allow yourself to fully relax, breathe slowly and deeply, then that is good. At the very least, you can just listen and deeply contemplate this visualization meditation. Allow your breathing to find its own equilibrium in readiness for this meditation. Close your eyes and imagine that you are standing at the edge of a large and beautiful park. The park is covered in lush green grass, colourful gardens, and many wonderful trees. The sun is shining and there is a light breeze that carries the scent of flowers. Take your time and allow the picture of this beautiful park to unfold before you. You can smell the grass and feel it under your feet. You can see the trees gently swaying in the breeze. This park belongs to you. It is your own private space where you come to rest and contemplate. In the centre of the park some distance away, is a cluster of trees covered in purple-violet flowers that also cover the ground below. The sun is shining in a dappled pattern through the trees, creating a wonderful and mysterious energy of colour, fragrance, and shady comfort. You feel yourself drawn to this serene place within this beautiful park. Now you are slowly walking toward this place within the park, and as you draw nearer, you notice a small child sitting under the trees, with head down. Even from this distance, you can feel the sadness in this child. As you draw nearer, you recognize this small, sad child as your own wounded inner child. And the emotions that you feel in your inner child, you recognize as your own trapped emotions that you have buried deep inside. You feel the fear, despondency, despair, and isolation flooding your mind, triggering memories of sad times in your life and the emotional woundedness they created. This pain is now sitting there in front of you in the form of your sad, wounded inner child. You hesitantly pause in front of your inner child, not sure that you have what it takes to deal with this. You want to comfort him/her, but you are afraid of the intensity of your inner child's emotions. You naturally don't want to feel this pain, and you are perhaps a little confused as to what to do. Your inner child does not acknowledge you at first as you stand there wondering what to do with this sad energy. Now your child looks up, but the eyes are empty and disconnected from you, as she is almost wishing you would go away. You feel the sting of your wounded inner child's rejection. You feel the discomfort of this, and despite wanting to reach out and do something, you feel powerless to help, and think about leaving because you really don't want to be in this pain anymore. But then deep down, you realize that leaving won't get rid of the pain either. You know you have to stay and find a way to reach your wounded inner child, who has his/her head down once again, as though you are not even there. You know you need to somehow find the strength to reach and heal this pain, and also find the wisdom to know how. To do this, you know you have to reach into yourself to find your inner source of unconditional love, your own higher self. What you have been taught in regards to connecting to your own heart of compassion comes to mind. You close your eyes, focus inward and breathe in deeply. With the in-breaths you open your mind and heart to the gentle warmth of loving acceptance. You remember that as conscious awareness you are the loving guardian of your vulnerable humanness, and that you are always embraced and supported in this love. Your heart opens and softens a little more. The moment you do this, you feel a wonderful presence drawing near to you. You look up and see your higher self standing there, fully radiant, powerful, graceful, and strong. Light radiates from your higher self, a light that you feel more than see. It washes through you, filling you with the warm glow of unconditional love. You turn to your higher self who lovingly embraces you. You find yourself enveloped in the energies of wisdom and compassion, as though they are one with you. You feel the loving power of the life force connected to you, at one with you, enveloping you, as though you have finally come home, the home you have always longed for. The embrace of your higher self is totally giving, totally unconditional. Within this wondrous energy, you feel utterly free to be whoever you want to be, and do whatever you want to do, and feel you have the power to do so, You linger in this embrace, soaking up the loving energies as your higher self remains fully present with you. The word heal comes into your mind, and you immediately think of your sad wounded inner child. As though tuned into your every thought, your higher self releases the embrace so you can go back to your inner child. As you sit down again in front of this small vulnerable being, you feel your higher self take up a position behind you, and you feel the love energy of your higher self pouring through you, giving you the strength and knowing that you need. You feel your heart opening up to your inner child now. You feel less afraid of being vulnerable to this sadness. You spend a little time just sitting there with your inner child, breathing him, her into your heart of compassion, welcoming the pain and sadness into your heart, the light of your own higher self. While doing this, you realize that your inner child's rejection of you is just a fearful reaction to the rejection he experienced and received in your past. Your inner child is expecting non-acceptance from you. You can see right through this barrier of pain now to the innocent, soft and gentle heart of your inner child. You let the barriers dissolve from your mind as you reach out and gently stroke your inner child's hand. Your child looks up, feeling the presence of the love and acceptance that is now radiating through you. You keep your breath open and deep, accepting your child self into your compassionate heart. Your in-breath is like opening your heart and drawing your child in. Your out-breath is like wrapping the loving warmth of your heart around your child. You now take your inner child's hand in your own and patiently look deep into her eyes, with your heart and mind fully open to this child now. You simply sit for a while, just being there, allowing your inner child to feel you. Feel your acceptance and your understanding. You send out a signal from your heart that you will be there for as long as your child needs you. As you sit there with your child's hand in yours, you see life coming back into her eyes. You suddenly feel the need to say all those things to your inner child that your child has always longed to hear. It is your opportunity now to care for this small vulnerable being, so full of potential joy and ability. It is your opportunity to enable the love of your higher self to heal the wounds of the past. Your child is opening to you now. Your inner child has finally come home. Suddenly, she falls into your arms and you spend time holding and stroking this child, pouring the power of your love, healing and rejuvenation into this little self. You feel the oneness between you now, as with yourself and your higher self. In fact, you feel yourselves merging into one. You feel the power, compassion, love, and the vulnerability merging into one. That is you. Sitting beneath the trees amongst the purple-violet flowers, green grass and soft sunlight, you find yourself alone and yet filled with a wonderful presence, and reflect on the newfound inner strength and compassion that is within you. The sadness has transformed into a soft warmth. You feel a deep acceptance of the vulnerabilities of your past, and feel the possibilities of future healing. When you are ready to leave the park, know that this space of inner unity will always be with you to revisit and deepen whenever you wish. You can revisit yourself in this way whenever you are feeling vulnerable. Remember that simply staying present with your vulnerable emotions with your heart and mind open to acceptance and compassion, is enough to create the initial connection and healing. You can also explore your inner child's needs. Be the loving parent of your child. Interact with your child and find ways to play together and explore your child's natural potential. All those things you wished you could have done if you had the chance and someone loving and encouraging to do it with. These are your memories. They are yours to do with what you want. Your child now has you. Furthermore, don't just limit this exercise to your mind. Get up, go out, and have some fun with that child within you. So let us look more closely at some practical ways to take care of the mind, to heal it, and to stay conscious, so that you can effectively manage your mind on an ongoing basis, and with this newly acquired skill, really create the life that you want. I have mentioned 4 main ways of doing this, and they are reading, journaling, meditating, and seeking out personal assistance in the form of a counsellor or mentor or both. So let's begin with reading. One thing that is very important to understand is that we are at an age where knowledge and information has never been better. Since around the 1860s, when the New Age really began, the most profound psychological and spiritual literature has been written, starting with Allan Kardec's Reformation of the Christian message around mid-1800s. And this is in addition to the ancient traditions such as Buddhism, the Jewish Kabbalah, and Sufism. In all these new texts and ancient traditions, unconditional love and total personal responsibility is at their core. This is the universal spirituality that has been sweeping human consciousness over the last 150 years. When it comes to the human mind and overcoming suffering, there is nothing we don't know now. All the information is available to us. It simply requires our will to act, our desire to learn, to seek out this information and to apply it. So to embark on your journey of healing and consciousness is stepping into the university of life. Be sure that as soon as you truly want to know, as soon as you truly want to heal and evolve, Supreme Conscious is right there with you. And as you are searching out the appropriate material for you, guidance will be taking a hand in helping you find that material. So there is no need to stress out in trying to find the right book, for example. Simply search calmly and be patient. The right material will find you as you are looking for it. It will meet you halfway. Then it is a matter of continually studying. Always be feeding your mind with something that lifts your consciousness up into the highest states of awareness. This is what keeps you on track. A good parent must learn the skills of parenthood and not just take it for granted. The same goes with parenting your own mind. And as you're reading, keep your journal handy and pen in hand. Write down the thoughts and insights that come to you. Explore the feelings that are triggered within you. Stop for a moment and really feel, and then write some more about those feelings. Journaling is a very powerful and useful way to connect to yourself. It is essential to focus predominantly on what you feel, and by listening to your feelings, focusing in on that, opening your heart, opening your breath, and be present with that, you're able to really hear the depths of your mind. You can get to the core of that conditioning that may be taking you in places that you don't want to go, that may be generating discomfort, stress, all forms of suffering. The journal is your meeting place with yourself on every level. You can write as the hurt and vulnerable child. You can write as the parent to that child. Or you can do your best to be that wisdom, the higher self. The essential thing is to accept your humanness, take full responsibility for it, and work with it. You don't have to limit yourself to a journal though. Some people like to paint. Some people like to dance. There are many ways to express yourself, to work through your feelings. And so, be creative. But journaling is very, very important, nonetheless. Don't try to just do it all up in your head. It is very hard to find clarity and gain perspective that way. Once you've written something down, you've captured it, and you can look deeper into it and explore it further. Journaling is an excellent aid to consciousness. Some people find journaling difficult, but I really suggest that you persist. Once you get the hang of it, once you get the feel for it, it will be a treasured aid to your conscious awareness. Meditation is a very broad subject, which I will deal with more extensively in a future episode. Briefly though, meditation is learning to observe your mind and body from the position of a neutral bystander. It is learning to identify yourself as pure conscious awareness and to not be the mind and body, but the carer of it. It is not about rejecting the mind and body, but it is learning to identify yourself as pure consciousness. Finding a counselor or a mentor is about finding a guide in the healing process, a teacher in the art of healing and consciousness, and someone to truly inspire you, lift you into your highest potential. Don't try to do this journey on your own. Certainly we all must take full responsibility for our own journey, but we are here to travel together. This is one of the beautiful things about the human experience. And as I said before, let guidance take a hand in this. If you are truly, honestly searching for healing and awakening, you will find the right person. And that right person may change over time depending on what your needs are and how you evolve. No one teacher has all the answers. We are all here with our own unique perspective. We are all holding a piece of the puzzle. So that is it for the second episode of Real Healing, Real Awakening. I truly hope that this episode has been of benefit to you. Next week's episode will be about steps 4 and 5. That's live in the now and live the process. Be a guardian angel to yourself, and love will always warm your heart. For wisdom is intelligent love in action.